Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Dobbs here. So what is it today? It's the 14th of April, 2020. So in my last video, I talked about how the full moon of about the 7th or 8th of April was going to be a real kind of like a real barometer, and we would see what happened over that period of time. That would be our kind of like, that would be our yardstick. I believe the term I used actually, that would be our yardstick of how things have, of how near or far we are to that object. And, you know, there were a few little shots. Excuse me. Hopefully that's not the virus. There were a few little shots. And, but nothing too, well, there were quite a few amazing, shots actually, and I'll take you through some of those things. But certainly, you know, we saw one volcano going off really out of the, I mean, there was quite a lot of volcanoes that are active at the moment anyway, way more than normal. But, you know, one new one that came up was one in Japan. I forget its name now. But basically, nothing to really mention. You know, and considering the kind of like, the big kind of the seismology that we saw around about the new moon about 2 weeks before, we saw the big earthquake we saw a relatively big earthquake. You know, some are saying 6.9, some are saying 6.5, but you know, in Russia, what I say in Russia, in those islands that are south of the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Pacific. But we saw a big earthquake there, certainly way north of Hawaii, way north of where we last saw the activity in, you know, May the 4th, 2018, when Kilauea went off. You know, not a lot of activity, but certainly a few sightings. Let me just do a quick share and just take you to some of the interesting sightings around that time. Okay, so let's just come here to Brandon Corey Nagley. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right there, Brandon. I love his videos actually. He's getting a lot of subscribers now. Really, really. I mean, I think he's getting a lot more views than because we've got listed down here as 490 views for this video, and his videos have got an amazing amount of content. So I wouldn't think that's any true indication of the amount of views he's getting. As so many of these channels that sort of like make that are real on the real news frontier of what's really happening. I mean, he's getting some amazing information being sent through. Excuse me 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, so on Brandon's channel here, he's kind of caught this kind of like now, how many times have we seen this? The fabled spider on the lens that we see so often when it comes in and at different angles. How many times has Jeff P showed us this? And it's kind of like, oh my God, we've had so many. Nigel's view on things, I think I've seen them on all of them. You know, we've all looked at this at various different times. What else is he showing here? Kind of interesting, kind of like, speaking on bandwidth, so I've got so many different videos open. Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's looking very, you know, obviously it could just be a cloud, but we're getting other suggestions of this. I can't remember who's just posted it. Maybe some of you might be able to say in the comments, because it's either sort of like it's really James Defoe, you know, what is it, what really happened, or is that's Michael Rivera, the what really happened? I do like his site as well. He's an amazing, but it's Impossible, James Defoe, the Impossible channel. I think it was either him or it was Mr. MBB333 just posted a video showing red hail coming down, and that's very, very interesting. That's very interesting as well. But the I found that really interesting. I just found these really interesting. I think also he did a video also breaking 7.8 quake hits Russia. Of course, that was the quake I was just talking about, which was around about the time of the full moon, just a little bit before maybe, but of the new moon, sorry. So and of course that's around about the same time as the earthquake in Boise in America, which must have rung true for Steve Olson, because that's where, when I first came to America, I remember that's where Steve was living in that's where I went to fight. That's where I went. I'm sure that's where I went to actually go and see in Boise, actually in the States in 2017 when we came out for Steve's big conference, Big Planet X conference. I tell you what, Steve, top tip, mate. It's time for you to get another conference together. There's a lot. I don't think we're really seeing the amount of people that are really seeing what's happening here, and I think you bring a fantastic audience together. And I've got a funny feeling that it's time to start thinking about another conference. There's a lot of information. It's really going to start unfolding now, because let's just jump forward a little bit. What other dates what other things can I bring to this right now, into this, what's happening right now? I've got a big list of pages that I've put aside to go through, and it's quite an interesting thing. And one of the things that's come out, let me just do a quick share over here. It's not really relevant to this where we're talking about right now, but actually in the bigger scheme of things, to the reason I wrote Laughing Gas, it is kind of relevant. So let me just come over to just do a quick share of this page that I copied the other day from a YouTube channel who wrote this story. The title of it is Donald Trump Controls Every Central Bank's Liquidity, double star, and Ripple / XRP is liquidity of last, and my picture of last. I don't know what the rest of the title is, but I think you're about to sort of find this story quite easily. What's his channel name? Is that part of his channel name? Swift GPI Part 3, The Empire Strikes Back, Ripple. I don't know. It's I think anyway. The guy talks about. He just talks about. We can see how Trump has pretty much complete control of the Federal Reserve. He chose the present kind of like Fed kind of chairman, and he's kind of like, who seems to do whatever he says, and just keeps the interest rates really, really low, whilst just lending out loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money. They've just agreed a $2 trillion stimulus package, and you can just see what's going on. Big companies are now going down, and the central banks are being given true trillions to spend on what they think is, it's an absolute. We can kind of see where it's going. But in Trump's one of his addresses recently, and this guy talks about it in his channel, he makes a very big deal of it, and I'm not going to go too much into the details of it, but he just talks about how Trump was referring to, in the quote he takes from one of his addresses, very recent addresses, was that that the banking sector needs massively updating. The banking system needs massively updating, and many of the computer systems are 40 years old. Now, this guy makes a really interesting point, and I'm sorry to digress so massively on my kind of like, but as you probably can tell, my immediate non-posting of a video after that full moon is kind of was in itself probably very indicative of the fact that we can see we still have a little bit more time on our hands here. This thing is coming in, but it's, and because it didn't come in when, I wasn't saying I was absolutely expecting it to come in April. Like I say, well, we're going to come back to that in a shake, and with the story's going to unfold, and we've got lots to discuss and everything else like that. But this is so relevant to this bigger picture. This is what I wrote about in Laughing Gas. What the big game was really, what was really unfolding. Why we shouldn't leave Europe. And I published that in 2011, 2012. Well, I published it, when I published it as kind of serialized it in the first instance from 2011, and then and they officially published it as a whole book on the summer solstice 2012. And hearing all the bees and everything else like that here on the trees, and every time I feel something, I'm like, oh, they're coming all over me. But it's great to see the bumblebees out. I'm up here, so like sitting up on the backdrop here, so this lovely cherry tree that is. Everyone says you've got to net it up, but it, you know, I know the birds eat all the cherries, but birds are beautiful. Can you see I've got a cardboard box up here? I don't know if you can see that. It's just covering up there to try and kind of stop the light coming down, so I can actually see the screen as well. So excuse the kind of like my kind of like my high-tech sun shield. But so staying with this story of the 40-year-old computers, that whole discussion, the 40-year-old discussion, is the very heart of Ripple XRP. Imagine if Donald Trump was going to crash the Fed. He was just going to lend out all this money and actually crash the Fed. You know, because they were going into a completely new digital-backed currency. And this was the big plan all along. The whole Bill Gates story, everything. It's all part of a big plan. You know, it's being brought to you through this massive show. But actually, that was the big plan. And, you know, imagine if there was going to be a digital dollar. Imagine if they were going to launch a digital dollar. You know, how long would it take to launch a digital dollar, to get it out there and to say, okay, this is what we're going to do to save the world economy. We're going to launch a digital dollar. It'd be like Enron coming forward and saying, guys, listen, we're going to set up a new company because our company is, we're just going to set up a really new, fantastic company with all this new stuff, and that's where we're all going. Well, what would happen to the share value of, say, something like Enron if they shut that out before they crashed it, took all their money out? Would we hear about the creation of a digital dollar to replace the existing system, the Fed and everything else like this, as Donald Trump calls it, an antiquated system? Would that be a likely scenario? Or could it be that the replacement's already been created in the form of a digital currency called the Ripple, that has been built around banks doing their kind of like their big exchanging that they do behind the scenes in a currency not just floated across the United States that made the dollar so powerful and then enabled it to be powerful enough to become the reserve currency of the world. Imagine if all of the banks, all of those who are members, as in signed up to this new free trade deal. I mean, you're hearing Japan saying that they're going to put aside $250 billion US to relocate all their manufacture back into Japan. So they're part of, we know that they're a definite paid up member of Trans-Pacific Partnership. And now imagine if they can only primarily do deals with other countries that are in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, i.e. when Britain joins in via the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is no doubt what this whole Brexit thing is, to try and drag as many European members into this new free trade deal to break up the European Union. But do they all go into the dollar? Imagine if they're all being brought in, and instead of just having the US dollar spread out all over all these states that just became the most buoyant and stable currency in our last kind of like in the last millennium, or in the last century rather, millennium, but in some ways the last millennium, almost, the way in which the old-fashioned ways in which currencies have been run. You know, what we're seeing is a migration into a completely new digital based currency, everything paid on the phone, everything put into a calculator and run from a digital base. You know, could the dollar ever actually really meet a calculator? Isn't it all just absolutely all dollars and absolutely no cents? Isn't it just printing it off money like they're doing now, trillions, just giving it away to their friends and just deciding the interest rates and everything else like that, and it's just running up masses of debts. Do you remember Trump? You know, this whole story about it's all just too much debt, and here he is, he's just gonna absolutely release hell on earth by just releasing all this money. I just heard that kind of like that whether it's the whole of Burger King or just this sort of like the branches in maybe New Zealand, but you know, just the notes on it were just the receivers are going to take it over and run it as, you know, take it over and get in contact with all the suppliers and keep the whole thing running. And so this whole economic crisis is, you can already see that many businesses are going to change ownership through this big transit, through whatever we're going to do. This is going to be a massive buying up of assets. This 2 trillion by the bankers, they're going to be buying up broken assets that cannot that are just that just are beyond their debt threshold, that are just way beyond their debt threshold, and they can just be reeled in. They're just ripe for repossession. You know, so we could see this massive migration. We could quite easily see how this is going to play, how this is all going to play out economically, and this is kind of very similar to what I was talking about in laughing gas. It's the real reason is why is the dollar, if we have got something big coming in, as I suspect we have now, and certainly sort of like Brandon's shot is very sort of indicative of showing that. But let's come away from that and let's have a look at some of the other images that I've just got up here to take you through here. Okay, so we come back here to Galileo Zodiac hidden in plain sight on a 50p coin. That was, you know, I made that video about you know, a couple of weeks ago, didn't I? And we've got that. I'm just showing there on the image here. We've got this image, which we're gonna just use as a little bit of a kind of like this was on the 1st of September 2019, and it was the shot that changed everything for me, really, because it showed the same curve here that I've put in here of this that one I've called this inner twin, I've called Connie, this one coming here, and then Earth coming around here in this angle here. So we were going to cut through and come around here. And this was a pivotal point in the change of my timeline, you know, and understanding that, you know, things were very different. And just before September, it was around about just before this shot came in, around about October the 20, or around about October the 20, I think it was October the 28th, 2000, and it was about October the 28th, 2018. And remember Steve Olson, Mr. MBB333, I think quite a lot of other people showed that big gravitational anomaly. I'm not going to put it up right now, but it was around about the it was either the 22nd or the 28th. I might be getting my dates confused. I think actually it was possibly the 22nd, but they all called it a big gravitational anomaly, and you can detect it. But it was like, for me, that date depicted when we were kind of in an alignment with exactly where Jupiter is. And this thing, I'm of a mind, is orbiting Jupiter. And that was October. And the previous year, you know, we'd had, it was around about the 28th of September when we'd had a big, it was 2018 when we had the big tsunami in Indonesia. And then again in, I think it was December, when Krakatoa was just utterly leveled, wasn't it? The whole top of Krakatoa blew off, and it wasn't listed in the volcanoes because it was considered to be a mudfly, but the whole top of the volcano blew off. And what else happened then? It was because Krakatoa's just gone off again, hasn't it? Literally a couple of days ago. What's the date today? I just said, I believe it's the 14th today, but I'm stuck in full screen there, so I can't tell. But I think it's the 14th today. It might be wrong, but I think the volcano possibly went off on the 11th, not near any full moon or new moon, really, to speak of. And yeah, if I think about the position, because let's just go to where, you know, I'm saying that the inner hub of that is in the October position, and the inner central point where this is orbiting around, which I'm assuming is Jupiter, because of the massive exploration we've done in the massive exploration we've done in the way in which the orbital mechanics adds up to Jupiter's orbital mechanics over and over and over again. I've just done it so many times with you, so I'm not going to devote too much of this video to that, other than if you watch the last two videos, oh my god, you'll OD on it. But it's certainly worth going through those orbital mechanics and those mathematical patterns, because they are absolutely, they're just incredibly beautiful. But just boiling this down to this kind of like sweet, kind of like the sweetest kind of, instead of calling, let's just forget the kind of 11.86 or 9, is it 86 or 89? 11.89 maybe years it takes for Jupiter to orbit. Let's just round it off to 12, just to keep this nice and simple again. Let's just think, we saw it in late October. So let's take October out, because we've done October, and then we've got November, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. We come to April again, and we come to that alignment again, that point where we're exactly on the opposite side of the Sun to Jupiter. Now, how many of you are going to have a little bit of a problem with that? Let's just come out of full screen mode for a moment, and let's just go over to, I've probably got solar system scope up here somewhere. I believe I have in this one. So there's solar system, what do they call it? Solarsystemscope.com. Great channel, great website. Great model, or what do you call a simulator. So we can see this kind of, where's Earth in that? Earth is there. Let's just have Earth behind, and we can see that actually, you know, what have we got in the, anything on this side is going to be kind of, we're going to see it in the morning, and anything on this side we're going to see in the kind of like, we're going to see in the evening. And so that's going to be our evening star. As the sun starts going down, and it just goes down, that's going to start appearing, I guess, above where the sun goes down, more or less. And I would be assuming that that Mars will start appearing later into the night, and I'm assuming that Jupiter will start appearing, and potentially Saturn will start appearing, and have started appearing in the morning. And so that fits with our Copernicus model, but it doesn't fit with my model at the moment, does it? In any shape, sense or form. Unless, of course, Jupiter was sitting above our sun. Jupiter was actually sitting up here in its aspect, and was going, I mean, I don't know, I haven't had any, I can imagine that it's being seen as morning stars, or, you know, morning planets. You know, I haven't been up, you know, up in the morning yet to catch it, but I imagine that they should be up there. But it'd be interesting to see how big they are, and because we might be able to see them, but I'm of a mind, like I say, that they sit actually above our sun. Obviously, it's a very confusing, it's a very, very confusing thing to define, because of so many contradictory reports and such the like, that it's like I say, it's a very, very difficult thing to define, because we've seen Jupiter doing the most enormous array of things that we just haven't expected, especially, you know, like I say, in 2018, where everyone was just seeing absolutely massive and bright blue. Because, you know, right now we're just having all these kind of like these images. NASA's just announced that the Juno spacecraft, I don't know if I've got it up here, let's just see if I can see that. Yeah, so here we have it. These are the images from the Juno. This is the, where's the blurb? Yeah, first pictures of Jupiter from Juno spacecraft, 24 pics. NASA's 1 billion Juno spacecraft launched in August 2011. And I think about 2011 when we were right next to it. That's the year Fukushima happened, when we were right next to Jupiter. When would they launch it to get to Jupiter? 12 years, it's coming right back round to this same point. You know, so it's quite interesting that they're beaming them back right now. And why they get the images, obviously, you know, they've got their reason why the orbit was like that, because they had a bit of a problem with this. It took 5 years to reach and settle into orbit around the gas giant, which is more than 450 million miles from Earth. The probe has so far photographed Jupiter's poles for the first time, detected bizarre cloud formations, recorded mysterious auroras, and scanned deep into the planet's thick cloud tops. Juno repeatedly swings by Jupiter in a wide arc to minimize time inside the planet's intense radiation belts, which can damage sensitive electronics. Now here it says, NASA planned to fire Juno's thrusters in October to increase the frequency of these flybys. Isn't that interesting that they planned to fire Juno's thrusters in October, which is exactly when we were last close to it? I know that sounds so difficult to say, but if you can remember that when I'm just doing this now, sweetheart, if that's all right. I don't know if you can, when did we have it? We had the, going back, so 22nd or 28th of October 2019. Then we go back to September 2018, the big tsunami, and then we go back to the 17th of August 2017, where we had what was it? It was when I flown to America, and we'd seen the big gravitational. Well, we'd had a massive gravitational anomaly, hadn't we? Now I'm of a mind that that was the central aspect of the guys, can you just give me a little bit of space now, please, just to make this video, because this is my garden right now, and when I'm working, I just need a bit of space. Is that right? So it was, yeah, so NASA planned to fire Juno's thrusters in October to increase the frequency of these flybys from once every 53 days to every 2 weeks. But sticky engine valves botched that operation. Now that's one of like NASA's classic little kind of like, is that real? You know, we understand that there's a very different story that that's going on here with all this stuff. Is it this crazy, oh, it has this big arch, you know, because of this botched blah 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 blah, but in reality this thing just comes around every 12 years, like Jupiter does. And so we're just getting very close to the point where Jupiter, it's just quite interesting, isn't it? How you could see it from, can you see, you know, when you start seeing the kind of we've just had a bit too much evidence, certainly with the kind of like the shot that Jeff P had posted on the 14th of October 2016, where we get the massive plasma bolt shooting off from Jupiter, or shooting to Jupiter. And like I say, I'm of a mind that's where Mars was, going right under Jupiter, and that kind of corresponds to where Jeff P's shot was observing in the sort of like the northeast night sky. And then the kind of like, and then the big volcano on Mars going off ironically on the 24th of, I think it was the 24th of October 2018, where, you know, it's a pretty massive you know, Mars is what 95% carbon dioxide, and all the volcanoes are dead, and you're kind of looking at it thinking, well, it's covered in carbon dioxide. Maybe that's because of volcanoes. Because if we can put the two and two together on that simple planet, maybe we can start seeing that if we've got all these volcanoes are going off on our planet at the moment, maybe we can attribute those largely to volcanoes, rather than going down this massive story of kind of like of Bill Gates' story of saying, no, we need to translate that into a vaccine that brings us down to carbon zero, rather than seeing that the volcanoes might be the real issue behind the carbon dioxide. And I've gone into that a lot, haven't I? So I won't go into that too much today, but these kind of positions of Jupiter, we're seeing more. We don't know if this is evidence, but that volcano yesterday, or on the 11th of Krakatoa going off, you know, that I don't believe is this twin tail object. That I am of a mind is is either Jupiter aligning with our sun, or the other side of it is that if we come over to this site, if we come over to this notion here of how I've laid out our sun and Jupiter and how they interact here. So we've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars orbiting our sun, and then we've got Jupiter with all its moons going in these two directions. And Jupiter obviously orbits the planet X system, not our sun. But because they're both orbiting the same thing, they both have very different orbital kind of like circumferences. They have this odd relationship when they pass through, and that's what I've tried to show here in this diagram. Now, if I come back to this image, where we see our sun orbiting, this is planet X, our sun orbiting planet X, Jupiter orbiting planet X, and Saturn orbiting planet X. And this closest aspect is the perihelion point. The sun has been going out here. Jupiter has been coming out here. And quite, this diagram is more to try and show the simplicity of their orbits, rather than giving you the absolute orbital kind of like dimensions. It's just showing you kind of like giving you a ballpark understanding of their kind of like all these parts that we don't truly understand yet. And yet we've seen, after discovering it, we've seen how all of their orbits are divisible by themselves and go into themselves, and how we can see how the grand deception is run, how every 84 years they come up with a new dwarf planet to explain these 4 cross points. So you can imagine, as we're coming along here and Jupiter's coming round, it basically means that the dwarf planet is on the opposite side of our sun to the dwarf planet. Even though it appears like our sun at this point, when it's going round here, would be heading in that direction, in reality it's moving very, very slowly, because in reality it's always moving in this direction, the same direction as this is moving. But relative to this, it's like it's going backwards. But in reality, they're all just constantly going forward in this binary relationship, orbiting, like I say, effectively the Milky Way. That is where our galactic center lies. And no doubt the Milky Way is orbiting whatever it is orbiting, and potentially in a binary relationship itself with with potentially another neutron star in some form or another. You know, we really, I truly do not understand, but but I can certainly, the mathematics without any doubt whatsoever lead to this kind of understanding. So if we understand that it's moving in this direction and that's moving in this direction, and we know that we can kind of surmise that the Jupiter's on the far side, not exactly on the far side because it's way in the northern hemisphere, but it's kind of like it's on the far side of the sun to us in the northern hemisphere, and planet X is behind us. And so we could see us also going to our, if you like, to our left, we have the sun, and beyond that we have Jupiter, or above and beyond that we have Jupiter. And to our right we have planet X, which ironically, though I've never really understood him, and no criticism against him, meaning I'm going to refer to as Terrell Blackstar, because in 2018, that kind of like April-May position was where Terrell had the dwarf planet, but I didn't understand him because in my opinion, and I might have him completely wrong here, he might argue this completely, but he uses much more he has a much more astrological vocabulary with his kind of like with his astronomical kind of descriptions, and that always throws me a little bit. But for me, this time that we're in right now, being directly opposite Jupiter, even though Jupiter is now kind of would be on the zodiac with point our ascent, I guess it'd be that's just coming into the sunrise point, you know, where the sun's rising. So you know, for a lot of people, if it is going to be they're going to still consider this as their Jupiter, a big Jupiter influence right now. But actually, Jupiter is directly behind, or being magnified by the sun massively now from where it really is, because of where it really is, directly behind. It's like when the moon is in alignment, we always get the full moon, we always get the maximum effect when the alignment comes with the sun, and it's true of all the planets, all our big earthquakes. And I'm of a mind that our sun, possibly Jupiter in this, but even Jupiter, I'm imagining if it's the end of October and then we come round, I'm expecting latter part of April to be that kind of the latter part of April, and then we could, you know, Jupiter moves a month each year, because it takes 12 years to go all the way around, so it moves 1 month every year. And in like I say, in 12 years, it will do a complete rotation. So we have to also account for that. So we have to add 6.5 months from the point we saw it. So it kind of takes us to early May, which is really, really weird. But maybe not that weird, because if it is kind of to our right, if you like, so let's just try and put that into a, try and show you what that would mean in terms of, because, you know, I'll explain why. Let's just go back to Firefox here, where I think I've got solar system scope up. Yeah, and then we let's just go to our current time. I think I've got it on actual time. There's Earth. Let's just have Earth here, so we can see, you know, we can see Earth there at about the 6 o'clock position. We can see where Jupiter is and that sort of stuff. So it should just be coming into, like I say, into a morning, you know, just showing up in the night sky before morning, basically. It's very close to the daylight, you see, which is also what I'm expecting. So I'm expecting that it's really over here, and our sun, our second sun, which is not really a sun because it's, you know, when you think about, you know, you're told that kind of all these big gas giants that have long since been hydrogen going into helium, going up the periodic table into denser things until they get up to things like iron, where they're just spewing out iron ore, which is the story of our big binary twin this, and it's spewing out iron ore because it's such a dense old sun. It's long since transformed all its kind of like hydrogen into helium, and way far bigger, far heavier mass, and much more debris has collapsed into into it, and it's grown and become this massive thing. And all of these, you know, to think that Jupiter is supposed to orbit our sun, just it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. It's a gas giant that's kind of like grown in massive size as a result of a fusion process and created all these new levels of matter in this process. And no doubt Saturn is the same. To assume they're orbiting something which is at the very beginning of this process is, to me, is totally backwards. But you know, this is a very, you know, the Copernicus standard model that was used to silence Galileo when, you know, when he said he'd seen Jupiter, it's very, very old. It's more than 400 years old. It's nearly 500 years old. It's just like ancient. It's a barbaric view of our solar system. But anyway, it's over there. It's to the right. It's right over here somewhere. It's exactly where Terrell Blackstar had it. So credit to him there, because our stories have to concur because of all the data I've showed you, you know. And so let's have a look at another few. Let's have a look at another few shots here. So these were UK residents stunned by Wormwood System meteor, Wormwood System meteor, sorry. That's another Brandon shot. What else have we stopped over here? Enron. I just picked that up because I just kind of saw how this kind of like, you know, massive thing like Enron going down. You know, we've got to remember that Donald Trump, more than anything else, is the master of bankruptcy. He's been bankrupt so many times. He's the perfect man to put in charge of the Fed, isn't he? Really, he controls it. So I'm just flicking through some of the videos that are just kind of behind some of the stuff that that's a bit of a kind of scary story, isn't it? That was an interesting shot here. It was a shot from Mysterious Things That Will Make You Question Everything. This is by this is another James Defoe shot, showing an image that looks straight out of an image that kind of like Earthly Patriot put up on the 16th of October 2016. Looks exactly the same, doesn't it? This red planet. That, in my mind, is because of the red dust being very close to this tail now. You know, there's a lot of red dust here. We're effectively going through, as bizarre as it seems, we're effectively going through the tail of Jupiter itself. All of these planets really coming around, you know, the 82 whatever moons and objects that orbit Jupiter. You know, we're very close to it, and we're going right through the tail of it now ourselves. And this is the back end of the tail of Jupiter, literally, that we're going through in a fashion. And no doubt that they pick up all this red dust when they go really close, get really close to their kind of perihelion. Jupiter and all its planets probably pick up that dust when they get very close to the dwarf planet and all the iron it spews out in its big fusion process that probably blankets it and makes it very difficult to see in a massive dust cloud of iron that just kind of like it curtains it all off. But it looks very similar to that, doesn't it? I believe it's a recent shot that James Defoe just put up, and you know, he's maybe that story of the red rain was in this here. I'm not too sure where it was, but it was he was talking about red I think it was him who was talking about the red hail, but like I say, it could have been Mr. MBB 3333. But sort of interesting colours in the skies, lots of kind of like you know, like I say, we saw the big earthquake that happened in May. Did it happen in May? Sorry, we saw the big earthquake that happened for round about the last, like I say, the last new moon, where the big earthquake in Boise and the big earthquake in kind of like there was an earthquake in China as well. Lots of activity in the northern hemisphere. You know, and we saw that around the last new moon. What can we expect coming around the next new moon, around the 7th, 14th, about the 21st, around about the 21st, probably. I probably got it up here. I think I've got a moon. Mm, 24th. It says, is that right? March, anything March? That's the wrong month. Sorry. April. 23rd. So we could probably expect to see much bigger activity around the 23rd. And then if we kind of now if I just come over and if we go back to, well, if we just remember this timeline, this kind of, you know, this was on May the 4th, 2018 when Kilauea went off, and then we just trying to think of some, and then that was 2018, wasn't it, where Krakatoa goes off, 2019, sorry, and then we get the massive sightings that we saw in the kind of like the December, January time, you know, and we've just, you know, we've repeated that, and then we came around to, you know, to this was all the big penultimate, the big December, January flyby, the penultimate one, and you know, all the sightings that led us into understanding so much more about the flyby that we saw in December, January just gone by, and all the myriad of volcanoes going on and everything like that. But this 200-day cycle that enabled me to start predicting the exact pathways of all these different asteroids and all these different comets. They keep calling, you know, Comet Ellen, Comet Ison, Comet Halley-Bopp, Comet Halley's Comet, Comet this, Comet that. No, they're just C's now. You know, I'm still from the generation that was pre-Comet, you know, when there wasn't just one every other kind of like every 200 days religiously. But if we go to that, let me just stop a share and just go over to well, I mean, just if we come to here, the 28th of the 10th, 2019, and we just add 182 days, that's like half a year. We come to the 27th of April, 2020. So that's kind of the 28th, when I'm assuming we're about in alignment on the other side of the sun with Jupiter. And adding half a year to get onto so we're in alignment again with it. We'd go to the 27th of April, and then we'd add another kind of 15 days to that. So it is about to account for the half year's movement of Jupiter in that 6-month period. Yeah, it brings it up around, you know, I'd expect something around about the mid-March April, mid-May. But if I go now to the day calculator again, where this all started, where this whole thing started from the big sighting that we had on the 5th of August 2011, and then the great pattern of sightings that fitted into this 200-day and enabled me to predict so many massive flybys. If we just bring it all back to that, outside of all the talk and everything else of that, and we just bring it back to that. Hello, little fella. One of the little ducks turned up to try and get some food. We come ironically to the 9th of May 2020, and ironically, we see this kind of like, we see this, we've had most of these flybys have been really accurate to never more than 4 days out to the time of a big occurrence on this. And we've managed to translate that, or I've managed to translate that down to, because of the 200-day anomaly, deducting and the two lots of those every year is 400 days minus the 4 days that we're always out. Like when I said it would fly by on the 25th of January 2017, and it flew by on the 21st on Trump's inauguration. Around about that time, maybe he was inaugurated on the 20th, but it was that his inauguration fit directly in with this flyby, as does so much of the big political kind of influencing factors seem to also fit into what we're realizing with this. Is ultimately it's Jupiter's moons that we're seeing, and it all fits around Jupiter and these orbital mechanics, literally, because of the 400 days minus 4 days, 396 days, and that 396 days actually is like is 1 year and 1 month exactly. And that is exactly the same pattern as Jupiter. We experience Jupiter. I mean, it takes a while to get there, but when you start working it out, I've done it so many times, I daren't do that again. But just to say that date is ironically is the 9th of May 2020. So that's another way of looking at, but more than anything else, these dates have been the times when we generally see it. That's been the most interesting thing, is more whether that's just because it's been further and further, it started off a long way away and it's slowly got closer, or because it just shows those points when it's furthest away from the sun, from our earthly perspective, that we actually get a window on it. Because when it's directly between us and the sun, we just can't see it. It's like the moon, it can be right there, new moon, it's right there, and yet we can't see it for love nor money. And this thing is no different. Comet Atlas now, we saw that, we saw the big flyby in December, January, of what I call Connie, the inner of the two furthest orbiting objects of what seems to be the kind of like Jupiter system. I call Bob and Connie. You could call them Shiva and Parvati. You could call them, you could call them Mary and Jesus. You could call them whatever you like, but they're the furthest orbiting objects. And it's just like I say, it's just such an it's such an unknown thing to until this flyby unfortunately goes by, we won't really know. And that might be true of all of the flybys, except I would wager that this flyby coming in will be the final part in understanding the bigger pattern of the twins, as Alex Luhan of the Planet X channel would call them. He's always called them the twins. Whatever you want to call them. And obviously, he got some amazing shots when we were coming past in kind of February, March, I believe, where he was seeing lots of different tails, and we were going right past. If you can imagine the object here and all the tails, all of the objects that are orbiting around this main object going past, and we're coming past them. We go past the tail, looking down the tail as it's going this way. We're going around that way. We see down the tail, down as to seeing all the different moons. There's 82 of them. We're getting a perspective of many of them as literally as we're going down that as we were going from the kind of like kind of December down to now. Really, we're still seeing them with this big one coming in now. It's a very, very big picture to get your head around, isn't it? And And right now we're just seeing them prep for the big harvest. This is putting a lot of pieces in place. What's happening now with COVID-19 and everything else like that, it's putting a lot of things in place, prepping for a complete digital currency, isn't it? It's all playing in the same direction. It's all going in it's all quite clear where it's going. You know, Bill Gates talking about his digital immunity, and you know, we can kind of see where it's all going. It's just, you know, what's really happening here. And, you know, it comes back to what I wrote Laughing Gas about, which was the big message I got. The really reason why I wrote this was that I was told your Earth will no longer support duality. And that's how I came into this whole big discussion, you know, and the messages that I got. And the powers that be are terrified because the old contracts that placed that were decisions by humanity before were to implement this kind of control system that was going to enable a mind control system to be in operation. That's been in operation for a very long time on this planet. Its contract, effectively, as far as I can see, is up merely because the proximity of this system and this current flyby, which comes by every 340 years, will be very, very damaging to the present status quo in terms of the type of mind control that's used. It will basically neutralize it. So they want to have a mind control system up and ready when that one goes down, so that there is no break in who you believe you are. Imagine if there was just a massive silence when this thing and there was nothing, no 5G system was put up, no thought transmission was put in place, and your thought, there were no thoughts other than which you created within yourself. You know, you had a truly sovereign mind, and that's what sovereignty really means: the right of your own mind. You know, the right to peace, to be in peace within your own state without being bombarded with a narrative that rules over you, controls what you do, what you think, where you go, how you respond to everyday situations, who you are, and ultimately what soul has control over who you are, what dominates your existence. And that's what's going down, and that's what's going to be attempted to be replaced. And ultimately, all of this process that's unfolding now, that attempts to take control of your mind in one way or another, is ultimately going to just make us stronger and tonify us and force us into, you know, what they're going to try and do is bombard you into fear, bombard you and take you into fear by, first of all, taking you into hunger, leading you into anger, leading into a lot of emotions where you become potentially fundamental and angry, and you become the worst possible you in this process. And then feed a load of fear and a load of hate. Trump's doing it already. He's the victim in all of this already, isn't it? The WHO done it, China done it. He's the master of blame. He's the master of bankruptcy. And you know, he's got the whole QAnon, you know, this whole PSYOPs QAnon thing, and all those people that are following this. You know, I trust in their intentions, I really do, but I do not believe that Trump's the second coming, that he's coming to, you know, his language, when he talks about, you know, the banking system's 40 years old, that's Ripple talk. That's digital currency talk. And that Ripple digital currency is the one that all the big boys have invested into. That's where all the banks have bought into. That's the devil sport. And that's the kind of like, that is the big one that will go up, that the central banks all control. If they invest in anything massively, that's where they'll be going. And they're already there. It's not like they have to create it. It's already been done. You know, all the people who created Bitcoin and everything else like that, and created all the kind of like all the exchanges and everything else like that, and now the central banks have kind of moved into that. You know, they've all got these different types of pay fronts. You know, whether it's Apple Pay or whatever you use. You know, all these independent ones. You know, there's they're there, they're up and running, they're happening, they have been for quite a long time. And the banks have more than bought into it, Ripple, XRP, and possibly a whole host of other currencies that might come up. But Donald Trump just pushing for the massive bailout stimulus package, which is just giving all the money to the bankers. And you know what they do when they get this money. You know, it's going to be carnage out there. It's going to be carnage out there. But is this the closest point of the flyby? Well, I don't think so. I think, do you remember last year when we had it fly by and then we saw all the asteroids flying through space? I don't know if I'm going to pull that video straight up without kind of a bit of a search, but I think so many of you have seen it. You know, Wrap the News put it up, some sensational shots showing just like loads of asteroids in the day sky. We're going to see all of that, and we're going to see a lot of kind of like stuff coming through now. We are in a precarious place in the cycle of this now. Seismically, we'll kind of get a little bit of a better idea in, like I say, in the next new moon. See what it's like. I can imagine the next new moon it's gonna again be in the northern hemisphere. More earthquakes in the northern hemisphere. It's, you know, we've got big stuff coming up. No matter which way you slice it, whether you see it's because of this, like the furthest orbiting twin tail object that I call Bob. Yeah, it's kind of here, this kind of relationship here where I set them all in motion, and we just kind of see how those bodies kind of how they interact, and how we can literally have two flybys. You know, can we see that? You can see the two I've got coming around there, and how they kind of like how those two coming through, and it's a big complicated mess, I'm afraid, of years of study now to try and get a window on all of this. It's you're in it now, you know. Now you're going to really realize that, you know, it's just like we've got likely hyperinflation coming in. I can't see how we're going to get around that with printing this amount of money off without actually just cooking the books, which you know, I think that's likely to be kind of regular practice for the Fed. But that's it, folks, really. It's this is wake up time, and their process of implementing this mind control will force you to not go into the anxiety and the fears and the emotions that they can drum up with all their different news, and what they can stimulate with their 5G towers, and the way in which they can simulate, no doubt, anxiety, fear, and all these different things, and send you into head spins, and send you into panics and all the rest of it. You know, it forces you. The only way through that is to go into peace, go into your breathing, put a big golden ring of light around you, especially if you're going to anxiousness. Maybe anxiousness is over and above your normal state, and you just think it's all you, and you think you're panicking. You know, do try and put a golden ring of light around you, and pray for assistance, pray for help. Say, I don't know if all this anxiety and fear that I'm experiencing is all generated by me. I feel as if I'm being bombarded and attacked. Please protect me through this. Please help me through this. And try and track your intentions. Try and track the reason why you're doing the things that you do and what you're trying to achieve, and try and see all your small steps that you're taking, and see why they're part of your big scheme and plan, and try to make sure that everything's part of the great plan that you're doing for the greater good. Try and remember why you do the things you do. Try to really track your intentions through this. Try to track them, everything you do. Even if you're doing something that's not tied into what you really want to do, try to remember that you're doing that as a means to get to where you're trying to get to, and try and bring that focus of what you're trying to achieve, what your purpose on this planet is right now. Try and bring your awareness back to your deeper intentions. Even if you feel you're way off course, try to remember those big dreams that you've got, and try to allow those big dreams that you've got to empower your now. Try to see how what you're doing now leads to you fulfilling your destiny. And try to, Jupiter is expansion, and Jupiter is massively affecting us now again with this alignment, and it's expansion. And expansion is often a feeling of being squeezed, because as you expand, you hit the limitations of what you have believed you are. And so you see all this new potential and all these new wonderful things that you want to do and be and create, but you suddenly feel this restriction of everything that you have, this limiter of this belief of what you are. And so it's Jupiter is it can be a very explosive thing. Nuclear bombs, the first atom bombs were created by ramming a pin of, what did they use in the first ones? They didn't use plutonium. I guess they just must have used uranium. Was it plutonium? They hadn't enriched plutonium, I don't think, by that stage. So I guess it must have just been uranium that was rammed into a big kind of cylinder of uranium, rammed in a place where it just didn't fit. And like water, if you compress it to a certain point, it just, water, anything can become, if you can't, if you heat it up to that critical point, like I say with Fukushima, you saw how it exploded in 2011. It can be quite explosive, can be very explosive. And anything squeezed into a place, it can reach that critical mass. And Jupiter is one of those things that it can bring about this expansive consciousness. But in a restricted environment, it's very frustrating, explosively frustrating. If there's other ingredients at play there, it can be quite explosive, because it's so expansive. And we are in this expansive time. And so try to allow everyone to have their opinions. And my opinion is not going to kill you. You're just considering the astronomics of the movements of these big players. I'm not proclaiming to be right. This is what I'm understanding so far about the movements of our system, that we are all, our sun, Jupiter and Saturn are all orbiting the same dwarf planet. And I'm just challenging a kind of 500-year-old antiquated story. Try and allow everyone to have their opinions. Try to celebrate. It's when you hear of a flat Earth theory, which I think I've often thought what I consider to be as absurd as the Copernicus story. But the only thing I'd say about the flat Earth story is that someone's had to break away from the status quo to go there, which means that they're in a gifted position when they're in that place of being open to different ideas, if they're not so religiously locked into flat Earth. But from a flat Earth perspective, you come out of a lot of dogma, because it's like you've come out of the closet. You've come out of this. It's like coming out of the carbon dioxide story for the first time. When that journey of me coming out of the carbon dioxide story, and suddenly, I'm just realizing, oh my God, it's all bullshit. I've been part of a total bullshit story that's created by the very people that sort of like created nuclear and everything else like that. A whole story to snare a whole bunch of people. And then just to be in this situation where they're attached to this story, and then they can be, you see Donald Trump, the WHO did it. Is it? No, the World Health Organization, WH. Hang on, what am I thinking? World Health Organization. Oh, I'm thinking of the WTO as well, getting World Health Organization. But yeah, the World Health Organization done it. Trump is just a massive blame game. Just that massive blame game. Always, everything's always fantastic. We're all doing fantastically, but everyone else done it. It's just blame, 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 blame. He's the master of blame. He is the master of bankruptcy. The master of bankruptcy. When he's gone, you know, if you're on the right side, if you're on the right side of him, then you get to pull all your money out in advance, and everyone's rich from everyone else's money who throws it in. Who just loses, just like Enron. Classic sweepstake. This is looking to be a classic Trump job. So yeah, just allow everyone to have their opinions, allow everyone to be open to all ideas. Don't be religiously attached to the carbon dioxide nuclear story that we have to build nuclear power stations on fault lines to stop the carbon dioxide spewing out the volcanoes. You know, don't feel you absolutely have to religiously go to that. Don't feel you absolutely have to religiously like go to the Christian story and proclaim that you're some kind of sinner, you know, to be saved. Don't go straight to the kind of like, don't go straight to any story. Certainly don't go straight to my story. Consider it all. Open your mind to all the possible ideas and be methodical and consider as much data as you can and be open. Just be open. You know, I'm saying that Pluto and Eris and Neptune and Uranus don't actually exist. They're all just to explain the crossing points of when we actually cross, you know, like Jupiter and Saturn at these times that contradict our present system. So be open to that as an idea. Consider that as an idea. Consider lots of the other things. Consider Terrell Blackstar's ideas. Consider all of these ideas and start looking at a bigger picture where maybe the bigger facade itself starts falling aside and you start just seeing how this game has gone on for not just for centuries, for millenniums. The same old story going round and around. And maybe we could change the record this time. Maybe we don't have to be led into this all-out horrible end game. Maybe we can do something different. But, and there is a but at the end of this, and it is a bit scary. You know, China is at their most powerful place now. And Trump is likely to rest the whole kind of COVID-19 blame game on China and the WHO and Bill Gates. Just so when this whole system unfolds, it's kind of not him who's done it, even though he's not likely implemented so much of this whole thing to create this massive new financial system. He's the front man for it. He's kind of like indemnified himself in so many different ways by, but it's just he's a master bankruptcy. Or master bankrupter. He's master of blame, and he's very good at it. It sounds like he's the best. He's the best money can buy. Yeah, this story's kind of going, isn't it? It's what it is. It's kind of taking its, but whether we go with it, how we go in it, what our wake-up process is in it, well, that's a whole nother game. So sorry, waffling on. It's been a bit of a long video, and I haven't really probably got you much further because the truth to be told is it's still so unclear. It's all still so unclear. I will leave you with one last little thing though, which is just show you that we had Mr. MBB 333 showing this shot here in a video where this is just coming up, and we see this unusual sign, which to me is kind of is the whole Planet X system. Not the Planet X system, the big twin tail that we have actually got coming towards us, and the kind of like the dust that it creates. And then we have SD1 here, and SD's, I'm a big fan of SD, and I think SD kind of, he often puts up stuff of my channel, so I better stop the sound there. But he's just basically showing off. I'll put this on a full screen, and I've seen my battery lights going out, so I'm just going to end there and move the computer. Hopefully you'll see that as it's playing, and I'm just take the computer in over here and plug it in, and just leave you with that shot that SD has just shot there. And to me, that's it really. That's the system. That's what we've got coming in. It's distant. It's in between us and the sun, coming off slightly from the side probably, and that's the one that's coming in. It's got a lot of debris. It's got a lot of dust. What we're expecting to see. Well done, SD. It's another absolutely fantastic shot, mate. It really is. You know, I just thought I'd leave that one with it there with you, because I know you won't mind if I should like play your footage there, but and just show that. It's just an incredible shot, man. It's an incredible shot. So onwards and upwards, all the love in the world to all of you out there. Like I say, I haven't been doing anything in terms of comments and email and that sort of stuff for quite a while just lately, because I've had to take a bit of a break from it. I mean, like I say, having this terrible skin, horrible thing, and I've just been so stressed by everything. I've had to stop and a little bit and take some time and just allow the present sightings to come in, because I still think this is early for what's happening. This is much more about asteroids, really, this one. I've got a funny feeling, you know, that the big party is going to be much later. The big part is probably going to be 2022, 23, possibly. But this is still going to be massive. Whether this could block out the sun, I don't know, whether on this cycle, but I could see it could bring a lot of asteroids and everything else like that. So all the love in the world. Not really very clear on very much at the moment, but I think we're all starting to see a bigger picture. And I think in the next new moon, around about the 23rd of April, the marked increase in volcanoes that we can start detecting now because of what we've seen in the last month's movement of the moon is going to be, it's going to put everything into a different gear. It's going to be like, hang on, something's going on. Something astronomical is going on. And it's going to be a lot clearer. So prep yourself, make sure you make sure you get everything you need, make water, food, all the things you need, because it's coming at you on many different fronts, because they want to take back control of this world as they've had it. They want the status quo, and this might not be the way it's going. And if it's not going to be the way it's going, it's only going to be us that change it. And so it's time to be awake. It's time to ask for assistance from the big gods here through this transit. Open yourself, protect yourself, do all the things that you have to do. Remember, nature doesn't store things in cans and stuff like that. It puts all this genius in seed. And if you want to survive this, you know, if you've got land and seed, you know, you're in a good position. Land, seed and water, you're in a good position. So just start thinking in terms of what it's going to take for us to get through whatever's coming. And many of you are going to already be sitting on a lot of food if you've taken preparation in advance. So you're not going to be sort of talking about going out and trying to buy food now when you can't buy food. And so you're going to have certain preparations ready. And the best thing you can do when the shit hits the fan is gear yourself towards a gift economy to run parallel to whatever economies they're going to set up, because their primary reason for setting up this new electronic economy is having digital electronic control over your thought process and ultimately what you experience as a human being, and through that ultimately control of what soul you end up choosing when we go into singularity. And that's what this pool's about. You know, each human has its ultimate choice of who it will be, which soul it will tally with at the end of this, as this is what this process does. And they are trying to nudge you into which soul that you will be. So even if they give you this chip, it's not the end of the road, but it's a much harder conundrum to get out of. You'd have to be a great master to overcome a chip that is just sending a narrative of who you believe you are over and above who you are, who your real residing soul is. It doesn't communicate in the same narrative as thought through your being. It communicates through feelings. And so we've got lots going on, guys. There's no shortage of stuff going on. We're just in the midst of it. We're in the kind of bubble zone where they're just all making their maneuvers to put their things in place, and you're in the kind of like we're all in the eye of the storm here, even in the sunshine here. You know, here, these days of sunshine, we're in the eye of a great storm. I think we all know that. And China now, everything's being shut down. They're being forced into a position where China and Russia are being forced into a position they have to act now. They have to act now. And that's the message from America, that whatever you're doing, so they're being enticed into some kind of aggressive maneuver, because they can see that the whole Western Front is shutting up shop to their industries, and much of their technology that they've developed now is going to go bankrupt. It's going to be out of date in no time at all, especially if Britain and America and all these other countries are about to do this big free trade deal and open up this new relationship with some kind of intelligence to bring new intelligence, but it's a contract with the devil. What does China think about that? That new contract will always have, as it has always had in the past, war at the very center, which means that all of those who sign into that deal will have to also sign into a great crusade, as they've always done in the past at this time. It's always been a crusade, always been a war when this thing comes in. And if China are not friend in this process, then we have to assume that they're going to be enemy. And all the kind of rhetoric is leading towards that, isn't it? What are they thinking about what the Christians are about to do to them in the name of their Christian God, their Christian war God? Because let's face it, Christianity in terms of a political movement has always come in the form of war. In terms of people, it comes with charity and heart and giving. In terms of government, it comes in the form of invasive maneuvers and war. So China knows what's over there, right around the corner. They know the blame game that's going to go on. They can see the likely consequences of what's going to come as a result of the blame game, as we can all, who are looking. You know, they're sitting on a lot of American debt. Would Trump backtrack on any of that? Would he put two fingers up to the Chinese, to all that we owe to China, in the name of "you done it"? It's all pretty set in stone at the moment, isn't it? The way things are going. So they're not going to announce a new digital currency, are they? You just got to see where that's going. Do I want to invest into that? One last little story, just by the by. You know, sorry it's such a long video. My videos are terrible, you know, really. But just by the by, is that when my truck caught fire up in the Pyrenees, and I made that first video, I had 6,000 XRP Ripple that I'd bought for barely anything in the truck with the passcodes, because I didn't keep them on my computer, because I was just like, don't give me my computer, they might get nicked. So I just like never had any more before, and they were really cheap. They'd just come out. I bought 6,000 for nothing. And my friends were saying, this is an interesting currency. It's been created by the guy who created, maybe, I can't remember if he created PayPal or Facebook, but it was just like, you know, he was up there amongst the big designers, and he created a whole new system to, like I say, replace the
40-year-old banking system that enables all the kind of like the final end trading between banks, which is basically, you know, the whole carry trade, which is what basically the US dollar ultimately is doing. And so this thing is talking about sort of sitting in the place of what the US dollar does in the main carry point of trading between countries, where they keep their kind of like, they call it the carry trades, or their kind of reserve currencies. And, you know, it's all set in stone now, isn't it? It's quite obvious which way it's going. There was 6,000 of those things in there, those coins, and do you remember the truck caught fire directly after I made the video? Well, what was peculiar was that one of the neighbours, whose name I won't mention or anything else like that, but one of the neighbours went absolutely mad during the process of me making the video. Got a can of petrol, put it round the building, and tried to set fire to it, except it was heating oil. Now, he would have known it was heating oil because it was his house. Yet when he went absolutely crazy, grabbed the petrol can, he thought it was a can of petrol. Yet he knew that it was heating oil. And yet in the insanity of whatever took him over, he thought it was a can of petrol and tried to light it. And then he got taken away by the police. Once he couldn't light the house, he smashed out all, in a mad psychotic thing, he smashed out all the windows of the houses on the street. And there was a little shop on the street in this little village. And then he got taken away by the police and was in a prison cell. And then we'd finished making the video, and I posted the video up, and I was going to go and sleep in my truck. And this was September 2015, when I made not the first video on Planet X, but the first one after I'd identified the 200-day anomaly. And I put together my first prediction of a flyby, which was going to come on the 22nd of December 2016. No, 15. And of course it flew by. I didn't know what to expect, but of course it flew by, and it put my name on the map. And of course I've done so many flybys using that model since then. Anyway, that guy went into a prison cell or a police cell for the night. You know, he's a lovely guy, and I'm not going to mention any names, no criticism, because he's such a lovely guy, and he just does so much amazing stuff. Like taking food to the refugees and stuff like that. He's totally proactive. So for him to completely lose it, not even know, I didn't really know him at all, but he went absolutely psychotic and tried to set fire to the house. And then when he was in a cell, we'd finished making the video. I posted the video, and of course it was a big video. It took like probably 12 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, whatever it was to load. And I went to bed. As soon as I posted it, it was going to load while I was in bed. And I went to go and sleep in my truck. And my friend Bart, who I'd made the video with, said, "Why don't you stay in the back room?" And I said, "Oh, well, that'd be lovely. Thank you very much." So I stayed in the back room. I was going to sleep in the truck. I had my whole bedroom, my truck, my home, and with all my stuff in it, everything I'd owned in it. And of course, I went to bed, and there was an engine fire on the truck. And you'll see the video the video after that video in 2015. You'll see it on my channel, and my pink truck completely burnt out. It caught fire on the top of the hill whilst I was in bed. It had this weird engine fire. It hadn't been used for days. It was diesel engine. You can't just set fire, and yet the engine had burst into flames. Now, you know all these stories about what's happening with sort of like with fires in kind of like in California, and the fires in kind of like Portugal and that sort of stuff. And these stories of these beams coming by, and it's the engine that always catches fire. The biggest lump of metal always catches fire and goes up. Of course, the truck caught fire and fully ablaze. It had started up. It was in second gear on top of the hill up on a mountain, and it suddenly just roared into life, fully ablaze, and bombed down towards this house that had just been rebuilt because of a fire that happened the previous year. The whole place had been rebuilt, and they were, of course, gathered around at the top of the hill thinking, "Oh my God, what is this English pink truck on the top of the hill that's caught fire? What's it doing up there? Whose is it? I hope there's no one in it. And I hope, thank God, or whatever, there's nowhere near my house that burnt down last year." And of course, suddenly, wham, like some kind of mad kind of like Hollywood blockbuster you know, Christy or whatever her name, or Christina or whatever, that kind of like that car about the kind of the crazy Cadillac that goes around killing people. It just, my pink truck just burst into life, wheels literally spinning on the spot as it just shot down straight towards his house, and the big diesel fuel tank that ironically he had outside his house as a farmer. And then hit this big tree, not big tree, a shrub more like, I should say, not a big tree at all rather, but a shrub, a big shrub-like thing that was just like, it just caught it enough to push it enough on its side that it stopped it and lifted that wheel off the ground, so it was just spinning on the on the spot and fully ablaze. And that's where the fire brigade finally turned up and put it all out. That's where it finally, you know, fully ablaze. And on that day, when I saw that, I thought, there's no way that both those efforts could have killed me. Two efforts to try and possibly, is it just a coincidence again? Just like the 200-day anomaly? If that fire had killed me, if either of those fires had killed me, certainly the latter one, I would have never, you know, the computer would have finished loading, but you wouldn't have been able to, the computer, you know, you wouldn't have been able to get into my computer unless you'd know my passwords. And so no one would have been able to go into my computer and press publish on the video. It would have none of this would have existed. And so there was 6,000 Ripple, and I often come back to that point of the regrets of that. And every time I come to that place, I just let it go. I make a choice to let that go. I think, no, you know, that's probably happened for a reason, because that is the devil spawn currency that is being created to entice you in to, you know, how many big Bitcoin kind of traders will have already bought way into Ripple XRP. You know, it must be $1 now. If there's not, there's billions, there's trillions, but there's billions out there, as I'm understanding. And, you know, and they were worth like $3.50. They're probably getting for $1 now. What are they going to go up to when they crash the currency? I'm not trying to sell them here, because I've lost so many. I wouldn't buy in again, because I've once kind of burnt. It's kind of like, but that was a direct hit from whoever that was. If that was someone, that was a direct hit on Davy Dobbs. You know, they tried to hit me and hurt me, and in many ways they did. They, you know, I haven't got a lot of money. You know, I just kind of like do what I do by not living in houses and living in old caravans and boats and anywhere I can along the way, just to kind of like, so I can do this without finances. But there's a sacrifice in that. You have to give up a lot. You have to give up a lot of stuff, you know, but also there's an adventure in that. But for all of you out there that are truthers, that you know, it's a novelty at first when you start this, but as soon as you realize you've got a fish and you're onto something and you're on a thread, you always feel as if you are that far away from potential fatality because of choices that you make. You know, your destiny is as likely to be your fate. And those choices always hang over you, and the cost of that and the weight of that. And every time I come into that and I feel that as a fear, I just say thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak my truth against adversity. And if it's my time, I can only say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And if they strike and they take me, then thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve here. And you know, just come back to the celebration of that. If this is about to be my time, then thank you for allowing me to be here in service, to have this opportunity to be here now. I have no fear if they want to come and take my life, none at all. You know, none at all. I knew from the very beginning that these sort of things would happen, and that I would be moved and guided to be where I was, where I needed to be at the exact time I needed to be there. And I've always trusted in that. And I've always put the golden rings of protection and invited that protection in. And you know, 1,000 thank yous, 1,000 thank yous. I just commune. When I'm in fear, I just commune with God, with my divine center, with my galactic core. I just commune, and any attempt to take me down ultimately only makes me commune with my galactic center. It brings me closer to my divinity. And I really want you to see that same thing. No fear, nothing to fear. If you're returning back to the select source, great. If you're going to stay here after the big one and stay for the big cleanup after, great. This ultimately is a win-win-win situation. That's what's being engineered here. That's why all parties have to be seen to be kind of like winning in this, because they are all winning in this. This is going to be a win-win-win situation. Good luck. Take care.